Let's travel back in time. Between 1200 and 1450, the world was this incredible patchwork of developing states, empires, and kingdoms, each buzzing with its own unique ideas and cultures. We're about to go on a global tour to see exactly how these very different societies built themselves from the ground up.
So here's our learning plan. In this explainer, we're going to analyze the different ways states formed between 1200 and 1450. We'll break it down region by region, like a grand tour. By the time we're finished, you'll be able to confidently compare and contrast all these different methods of state building across the globe. Here's our itinerary. We'll start with the powerful blueprint of Song China, then hop over to the innovations happening in Dar al-Islam. From there, we'll explore new powers popping up in Asia and Africa, then contrast what's happening in the Americas and Europe. And finally, we'll zoom out and weave it all together for the big picture. First up, Song China. You kind of have to start here, because in so many ways, it was the civilization setting the benchmark for what a powerful, organized state could look like in this era. So what was Song China's secret sauce? It was this incredible thing called the imperial bureaucracy. Now, this wasn't a system where you got a government job because of your family name. No, this was a meritocracy. To become a state official, you had to pass these incredibly difficult civil service exams based on Confucian philosophy. This created a super effective centralized government run by the best and brightest. And here's where it gets really cool. That stable government fueled an absolute economic explosion. They had massive innovations in farming, like champa rice, which let them get 2 harvests a year instead of 1. All that extra food meant bigger cities, a booming iron and steel industry, and a true commercial revolution, all connected by the massive Grand Canal and fueled by the world's very first paper money. Okay, now let's pivot. We're leaving the super centralized power of China and heading to the Middle East, to Dar al-Islam, a world that was experiencing 2 things at once: political fragmentation and amazing intellectual innovation. So at the same time Song China was consolidating power, the huge Abbasid Caliphate was actually breaking apart politically. But, and this is a huge but, this was not the end of Islamic power. Not at all. Instead, a whole bunch of new dynamic Islamic states rose up to take its place. And a lot of these new kids on the block, like the Seljuks, were Turkic peoples who had migrated into the region and adopted Islam. And one of the most fascinating examples of this is the Mamluk Sultanate in Egypt. The Mamluks had a wild origin story. They were originally non-Muslims, often young Turkic boys, who were enslaved, brought to Egypt, converted to Islam, and then trained to be an elite warrior class. They became so powerful, they eventually just took over, creating one of the most stable and powerful states in the Islamic world for centuries. Now here's a crucial point. Even though the political map was fractured, Dar al-Islam was a buzzing center of learning. You had the House of Wisdom in Baghdad preserving ancient Greek texts, and scholars were making huge leaps in math and medicine. A lot of this knowledge actually made its way into Europe through places like Spain. And Islam itself kept spreading. Not so much by the sword anymore, but through merchants on trade routes and charismatic Sufi missionaries. Okay, let's keep expanding our tour. Now we're heading to South and Southeast Asia and down into Africa, where we're going to find even more diverse ways to build a state. And South and Southeast Asia, you really can't talk about the state without talking about religion. It was the absolute bedrock. You had powerful Hindu states like the Vijayanagara Empire and incredible Buddhist states like the Khmer Empire. They used their shared beliefs to unify people, justify their rule, and create amazing culture. And at the same time, you see this awesome cultural blending, like the Bhakti movement in Hinduism and Sufism in Islam, which both focused on a more personal connection to the divine. Meanwhile, down in Africa, powerful states were rising up, often built on controlling key trade routes. And way before the famous Great Zimbabwe came to dominate, you had the kingdom of Mapungubwe. They got rich and powerful by controlling the trade in gold and ivory across the Indian Ocean. These were sophisticated, wealthy states deeply plugged into the world economy. Okay, time for a quick self-assessment. I want you to pause for a second and really think about this. How was state building in Africa, which was so reliant on long-distance trade, different from state building in South Asia, which was often more based on religion and land-based agriculture? Go ahead and pause and think about where their power and wealth really came from. All right, let's jump across the oceans now to the Americas and Europe. These places were developing largely in isolation from Afro-Eurasia, but it's really interesting to see how they compared to each other. And what we see are 2 totally different paths. Over in the Americas, huge centralized empires like the Mexica,
who you might know as the Aztecs, and the Inca were in charge. They controlled vast territories through systems of tribute and coerced labor, like the Incan Mida system. Europe, on the other hand, was the total opposite. It was politically fragmented, made up of decentralized monarchies that relied on a system called feudalism, a web of mutual obligations between lords and their vassals.
And this map just says it all, doesn't it? You don't see one big, unified empire. You see a messy patchwork quilt of kingdoms, duchies, and city-states, all competing with each other. A big, powerful, centralized government was definitely the exception in Europe, not the rule.
Okay, time to practice a key AP skill. I want you to pause the video and try to write a single sentence, just one, that makes a comparative claim about state building in the Mexica Empire and feudal Europe. Don't be shy, give it a shot.
All right, you back? A really strong claim would sound something like this. While the Mexica built a centralized empire demanding tribute from conquered peoples, European states were decentralized systems of mutual obligation between lords and vassals. You see how that works? It directly compares both of them and uses specific, accurate vocabulary.
So our world tour is complete, but now comes the most important part. We've got to bring all these different stories together and synthesize what we've learned about how states were built all over the world during this time.
This table is our ultimate cheat sheet. Let's break it down. Look at the governance column. You see the huge contrast between China's slick bureaucracy and Europe's messy feudalism. Now look at legitimacy. See that common thread? Religion, religion, religion. It's everywhere, just in different flavors. But then, look at the labor systems. Wow, talk about diversity. You've got everything from free peasants in China to the coerced serfdom in Europe and the Mita system in the Americas. So let's nail down the key takeaways. Number 1, there was no one-size-fits-all model for building a state. It was incredibly diverse. Number 2, religion was absolutely crucial. It was the software that ran these societies. Number 3, how you built your economy mattered, and it varied a ton. And finally, remember that Song China stands out as that powerful benchmark of a highly advanced, centralized state.
Okay, one last moment for self-assessment. As you look back over our tour, which region still feels a little fuzzy, a little unclear? That's your cue for where to review. And on the flip side, which comparison that we made today was the most surprising or interesting to you? Thinking about that helps make these connections stick. So we end in 1450 with this global tapestry of states, each governing in their own unique way. But that leaves us with a huge question, doesn't it? What on earth, what kind of technological, economic, or cultural change could possibly be big enough to smash these separate worlds together and bring them into direct, permanent contact? And that, well, that's the question that's going to launch us right into the next